Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya al mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is the second Friday of Shawwal, second Jum'ah, and no doubt no one can ignore what's been happening this entire week in the news. It's been dominated by the incidents in America, the rioting, the protesting that's going on there. We all know the story of George Floyd, who was killed in a very oppressive way by white police officers. And had that video not been made, would they have been arrested? Would they have been charged with the murder? That's another question, isn't it? But I think we have to understand, or try to understand, especially those of us who are not from America. We don't maybe get what is fully happening. It's important for us to talk to people in America, especially from the black community who we trust, and we can get a fuller or better understanding. But I think we can all empathise with being a minority and being treated differently as second-class citizens from the state. So as Muslims, we suffer Islamophobia. But I think before we equate what's happening there to maybe our situation, or there's correlations, like there was a picture of an Israeli soldier on the neck of a Palestinian. Again, of course, that is oppression, and there's a lot of similarity, and there's a lot of oppression that's going on currently and has been going on in Syria, for example, in what happened to the Rohingya Muslims, in the Muslims in China, and so on. There is oppression by the state on people. We see this all the time. But I think what makes the situation slightly different in America. I mean, I remember many years ago we had a conference, and it was about Islamophobia and also Muslim community suffering racism and obviously discrimination because of religion. And there was a gentleman from England saying that, well, I suffer discrimination as well because I'm English in Scotland, so I get called all sorts of things. And there was a female Muslim convert. She said, look, I'm white, and I'm not, and also she was English as well. She said, I understand what you're saying, the discrimination, but she said the discrimination I get because of being Muslim wearing a hijab is a lot more and severe. So unless you're experiencing it, it's difficult to understand. So that Englishman couldn't possibly understand what she meant because he's not ever wore. He's obviously male, but if he doesn't know what it's like to be a female wearing a hijab, and having racism and discrimination against you. And similarly, because we're not from America, maybe we're not black, we can't fully maybe appreciate what the trauma and the pain that the people there are going through, because this is not something new. This has been going on for a long period of time. And I remember somebody saying very, very interestingly, said that, look, even other places where you're discriminated against, there is racism, but you still know who you are, you know who your forefathers were, you know where you came from, etc. And he said that whereas the black people in America, they were forced to be there, so they didn't come by choice. Everyone else has of different ethnicities have come to America to pursue the dream, or whatever you want to call it, the American dream, but they came through their choice. The blacks were forced to be there. They did not come by choice. They were forced to be there through, as we know, through slavery, and their ancestry, their lineage was completely cut. So this is why obviously Malcolm had an X, Malcolm X. He put an X because he said it represents the unknown. I'm not going to take the surname of my slave owner because that's not my lineage. So this is the thing that can you imagine the trauma of not knowing who you are, where you came from. So that's the first trauma. The second trauma, obviously, over a period of more than 300 years, from about 1500 into the 19th century, they were forced into slaves were brought over from Africa to America. Estimates, we don't know for exact numbers, but estimates are about 12 million, and also there's estimates that about 30% of them were Muslim. Now, Their identity was erased. Their makeup, they tried to break them down to make them enslaved people. I mean, if you read up on this, it's horrific how they were brought over. About, they say, I think 1.5 million died on the ships because it was a month's journey, and they were stacked up like sardines, and they were defecating on one another, urinating on one another. It's unbelievable that how another human being could treat someone like that. So it's the knee, and then obviously they came out of slavery, but they've struggled to become equals up until today. We're seeing it today. That's still happening, even though slavery came to an end, even though all the civil rights movements that happened in the 60s and everything that happened, and it used to be obviously white areas, black areas. You've had a black president, but still this is still happening. The discrimination is systematic. It's in the actual system. There's institutional racism, and so the black people have been suffering for a long period of time. 400 years they've been suffering. Okay, they've been suffering for a long time. So the trauma of that is very difficult for us to appreciate. We have to try to understand, read up more, find out more, speak to people from there, and try to understand their perspective a bit better. And then that will obviously inform us, and so we don't say maybe things which are not correct, and also possibly deemed harmful, or people feel pain when we say certain things because we're not understanding. This is the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, and people start saying all lives matter. They didn't fully get that the trauma and difficulty that black people face is not like other people in America. And so I think we have to just appreciate the long history of oppression. That's why the knee on the neck has been there for ever since they've been in America, and it's still there. It's not come off. And that idea of the state oppressing a section of the people is not new. It's not something that it's just happening now. It's been happening throughout history. But I think we also have to, well, I'm going to talk about that, but also we have to understand that oppression is unlawful at every level of society. So it's not just about, we tend to think of oppression of the state against the people, or of tyrants against people in leadership against, or the rich against the poor, and so on. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu la yuhibbul zalimeen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like or love those who are oppressive. And so oppression at any level, which means, and this is where I think we have to think of, yes, we agree, I think all of us agree, that what's happening is incorrect in America, and that needs to be addressed. And there is oppression against black people, and that needs to be lifted. And there's oppression against Palestinians, that needs to be lifted, and so on. But that is obviously, we're looking at the others, but we have to look at ourselves as well, because we can be oppressors as well. How can we be oppressors? You can be an oppressor in your own home, right? If you can be oppressing your spouse, you can be oppressing your relatives, you can be oppressing people at work, you can be any position where you have authority or influence over other people. You have to be very careful that you do not oppress them for your own gain, whether it's a feel of power or whatever else it may be. We have to be very careful that we're not oppressive, because you do not want to be resurrected with the oppressors. Okay, it's not just going to be the tyrants that led people in the hereafter who'll be resurrected as the category of oppressors. It'll be other people who have also oppressed others. So let's be careful in our own. Don't just think of this as an external thing. Let's internalize. Let's see, am I oppressive? Am I oppressive in any shape or form in my life towards other people? And if it is, I need to also change as well. So this idea of oppression, like I said, is not something new. It's been happening throughout history. And then even if you read the Quran, there's a story of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. And as I mentioned this in my tafsir lessons, that this is the story which we see most repeated in the Quran, because this is the story of this is like mankind, right? You have the archetype of Fir'aun, who is an oppressor, who is very rich, who is has people enslaved, And he's not interested in changing the system because it works in his favor. Okay, and at the heart of it really is the fact that the Fir'aun and others like him believe they are better. They have life has more value than other people. Other people are there to serve them. Right now, think of that, because the Fir'auns, it didn't just finish with Fir'aun. The Fir'auns throughout history, and we are seeing people with those traits now. You know, people who will move peaceful protesters with force so that they can get a photo, because at the heart of it, I am more important than you. My life is more important than yours. My wishes are more important than you. This is where it comes from. And the same thing happened with the Prophet ﷺ and Quraysh. Quraysh did not want, Abu Jahl knew who the Prophet ﷺ was, and he saw miraculous things. But, you know, for example, there was one time he was about to throw a boulder on the Prophet ﷺ and his hands froze, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ to make dua so that they would become relaxed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said that he saw things from the unseen. Okay, so the thing is, they knew who the Prophet ﷺ was, but again, it's not in their favor. They're at the top. They're rich. They've got other people serving them. If I become Muslim, I become equal to everyone else. I lose my status. I lose my, my privileges, and I am better than them. So why should I? So that's where it comes from. And so this idea of Fir'aun and Musa, this has to be studied. We have to look at the story over and over again. And again, Fir'aun, because he was more important, he had this dream that somebody from Bani Israel was going to take his throne. So he decides to kill newly born males, right? Because my life is more important than theirs. I'm not going to take any risks. I will do whatever I need to do to stay in power. And even though Musa alayhi salam is obviously the archetype of the good person, the humble person, the sincere person, doing the right thing, even though there's difficulty, and he stands up time and time again. But the thing is, it's not black and white, right? It's not it's not like there's there's good and there's completely evil or anything like that, right? It's more nuanced like that, because if you look at Fir'aun himself had within his own family his wife Asiya, and also a person from his own kind of closer family, or some say family members, or at least in his inner network, who became believers. And then he actually in the Quran talks about how he tries to give nasiha to the others. So in the side of Fir'aun, there are good people, and we also know the magicians who then became Muslims when they saw Musa alayhi salam's miracle with the staff. And in the Musa alayhi salam, also, Bani Israel are not the perfect people. He has problems with them. There are disbelievers within them. There's that Samari who, when Musa alayhi salam goes away for 40 days, he gets the jewellery and makes it melts the gold and makes it into the shape of a calf to worship, right? So Musa alayhi salam himself has lots of problems when he wants to take them in Bani Israel into Bayt al-Maqdis. They said, we're not going to go in. You and your Lord go and fight. Okay, and when you've done, then we'll come. So there's it's a bit more nuanced than just thinking that it's the people in all white people are wrong, or all black people are correct. And this is why Malcolm X, when he went to the Hajj, he was obviously part of the Nation of Islam, and he used to say things like the white man is a black man's devil, and so he saw all white as being the oppressors. But when he went to Hajj, he saw all nationalities, all colours, and he changed his views. He realised that we were all doing the same thing, and ultimately we're all slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so not all white people are bad, okay? And therefore he completely changed his views when he came back and became orthodox, okay? Because in our religion, we don't look at race. Race does not, and the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to say, right, because by virtue of your colour of your skin, you get extra brownie points, isn't it? That's not going to happen. So we have to understand where racism comes from. The first racist obviously is who? Shaitan. Ana khayrun min. I am better than him. You created me from fire. You created him from teen, from earth, right? So every racist is following in the footsteps of Shaitan, who was the first racist. And that's why all racism must be stamped out in our community. It's not just in America by some white people against black people, but it happens within our communities as well, within Muslims themselves. Okay, I've lived in the Muslim world, and I've seen racism from Arabs towards other Arabs, or again, even within, like, say, one community, like, say, like the Pakistani community, there's sometimes racism between ourselves due to caste or due to even color skin as well. That, you know, if someone's a dark skin color, they're not seen as favorable for a light skinned person, especially when it comes to things like marriage and so on. So these are things which we also need to work at, of getting rid of any racism within our own ranks. And the Prophet ﷺ worked very hard at eradicating this in his own time. If you look at, for example, Sayyidina Bilal, who was freed slave, he was freed by Abu Bakr Siddiq from Abyssinia. He was black, and he was the first mu'adhin, he was the first caller to Salah, and at some point he also becomes the head of treasury. And though we're not trying to say, I mean, this was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it's not that it wasn't there, it was there, because there's an incident with Abu Dhar, who himself actually had a dark complexion, and he called Bilal the son of a black woman, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, you're a person who still has jahiliyyah, you still have ignorance. And he felt so remorseful that he laid in the ground, and he asked Sayyidina Bilal to put his foot on his face, which Sayyidina Bilal didn't do. He forgave him. But it shows that the lengths that the Prophet ﷺ went to eradicate this type of behaviour. So it's not that it wasn't there, and it's not that it will not always be there, but we need to fight against it. And this is why, even though in our history maybe black people have also struggled, like, we can't say that it was completely eradicated, nothing ever happened, although obviously it goes against Islamic teachings. But black people did have the ability to rise in the Islamic system, the state. That you have people like Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who was black, and he became like Mufti of Makkah very early on. I mean, he's just in the Tabi'in after the Sahaba generation. And then you have, for example, Usama bin Zayd, who was the son of Zayd bin Haritha, who was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, and his mother was Ayman, who was also a former slave woman from Abyssinia, who was the nanny of the Prophet, who the Prophet said, "Kanat ummi bad ummi." She was my mother after my mother. And he was their son. So and Zayd also had dark complexion. So Osama was very, 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 very dark. You could say he was black. And the Prophet ﷺ made him, at the end of his life, a general of the army that was going to go towards the Romans, and he was still only a teenager. Okay, so being black did not stop people, rising in the ranks, in the Muslim ranks. And also we know the first martyr in Islam was Sumayyah, who was also a black woman, and she has a high rank because of that. And so the Prophet emphasized this in his last sermon, in the farewell speech, and he emphasized this to really make sure that this message gets through. And he said there's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or for a non-Arab over an Arab. He said that, or a white person over a black person, or a black person over a white person, except in taqwa, okay, except in piety, except in God consciousness, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, we created you from a male and female, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا, we made you into nations and tribes, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so you get to know one another, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ, surely the most closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most honoured in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one who has most taqwa. It doesn't matter who you are, which nation you came from. It's about how much God consciousness, how much of a life of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you've lived, which is going to count, not the colour of your skin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lift oppression everywhere and always make us on the side of the oppressed. And the Prophet also said that the dua of the oppressed is answered. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala change our world for the better. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslim kathira. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.